You all, I just wanted to welcome you to Transforming Business Leaders today on July 25th, 2018. I will be your presenter. This is a culmination of the Masters of Arts in Leadership Practicum. This is Leaders 699 for Cohort 3 for myself presenting today. And I hope you enjoy it. It will approximately go for about 30 minutes. If you have any questions along the way, you can pause it at any time, and I will be on the phone and through Skype to answer any of your questions at any point that you want to, again, pause this presentation. No problems at all. Before and or after will be available too, along with some various other things. So without any further ado, let's get into it. This is, again, Transforming the Business Leaders. Presentation agenda that we have planned for today. Again, approximately about 30 minutes. This will include starting off with a motivator, a short video clip that's online through YouTube I previously sent out, kind of sets the stage, goes for about 2.5 to 3 minutes. Then we get into an introduction, shorter review of what we're going to be going over. Project summary will take us through all the high points. That's all we have time for. And what we'll be going through is looking at some of the findings of the study itself, finish off with a final review of everything we go through, and having a closing of a few last things that I thought was pertinent to include here. So if you don't have any questions on that. This is the motivator that I've talked about. This is something I did special for Cohort 3 and something I thought would bring it together for future cohorts. All you have to do here at this point is click on where it says click here for presentation. The picture will do the same thing, so anything in that area, and that would be it. Let's get into the actual introduction. What we're looking at overall is the actual project conceptualization and considerations. In other words, what exactly was envisioned to start off before anything was identified. In my head, what I was looking at was something for an importance of a worthwhile issue. Looking at the scope of a potential project to see if it was even feasible and or worth it. Looking at target audience from who presented to and who presented for. And then finally looking at study benefits because all those things. Looking at then issue importance. Specifically, we wanted to look at the program relevance. In other words, what exactly was going to be looking at a Masters of Leadership course practicum and program. How relevant from what we had learned in that could this study be? What was the societal significance as far as something going on in society that was considered significant enough to study, still within having Masters of Leadership as kind of a, I don't want to say premise, but underlying significance or underlying theory behind it and help and support it, and looking through that lens. And how feasible was it, again, under kind of more of a scope type issue, but was it feasible to get it done in this way and bring it all together? Was all that going to happen? This is what we were talking about specifically, getting more into it now. Looking at the scope of the project itself, we look at data limitations, which there were quite a few. And what I would say in advance, what it was as we summarize it, was that time. We were looking at not a full semester for this particular course. We envisioned it a year in advance, but as we were finishing up one course for the first part of the semester, then we just had the last part, or what you'd call a term, Target audience was incredibly interesting because when you looked at this, and not everybody does once they leave the associate level, when you look at a target audience and you're saying, okay, I'm going to present this. Well, yeah, what are you going to present? Are you presenting to, for instance, the graduate faculty at the University of Jamestown? You'll see that mentioned right here. Yes, you have to. But is there any chance your work could go on? Could go on to a scholarly journal, and as we did 2 classes ago, the chance of someone picking it up and saying this is worthy for other scholarly journals and a readership, within a field, within the field, that people would like to also share and read and learn more about Michigan's economic status. Any future university, which you've learned through the plan proposal, and or a new program considering the actual plan proposal, they would be considered target audience at the same time to consider, along with future cohorts, graduate cohorts through University of Jamestown, anybody that could be shared this, as we did a disclaimer, any kind of business student and undergraduates in the future between some specific ages. We tried to focus in on between 21 and 25. We had to still include them in some way to let them know that we were thinking about them as far as what information we put together and how. Looking at the study benefits, this didn't have to be included. There was no right or wrong way to say, hey, you had to have this, but you couldn't have this and that. The reality was, I felt it pertinent that as you were trying to get this into some scholarly journals, possibly in the future, get this sold in as a new plan proposal for a future Michigan University possibility in the future, that you had to have an idea not only what the benefits of the program and the project would be, but at the same time have some study benefits as far as for University of Jamestown, let people know exactly what you were trying to accomplish. And for myself as the author, I needed to fill my master's degree requirements in a meaningful way. I wanted to address, hence, a correct and meaningful issue in that way. I wanted to further the research within the field to do that, and I wanted to contribute back to the MLA program for the future as far as growth went, by making that my plan, by making that my proposed plan of how to do it in the future. Here's an idea looking at the actual project summary next. What we started off with was basically just looking at, as far as research, what kind of methodology or what kind of methods were used, and trying to formulate a research question as we were doing that. At the same time, trying to tie in that as a premise to further the rest of the research that we were doing and our methods, to then formulate the problem statement as far as saying, what did we identify that could be a potential problem or a hypothesis, basically to continue within that same, again, premise surrounding the research question, to move on to then proposing a plan to address it and or correct it in the future, and then report on such through our graduates' capstone and our. Specifically for the research methodology, we use a very simple mixed methods approach, which was a lot of quantitative analysis supplemented by some qualitative type interviews and methods. Obviously, what we alluded to, this is the actual research question, and I'll read it verbatim. Is the state of Michigan, or was the state of Michigan, considered economically viable and competitive within the American marketplace in terms of lead industry, workforce development, and higher education? If so, does Michigan have a commanding position to clearly substantiate rating or ranking within the top 10, for example, in the nation, of all 50 states then? Or does the Michigan's economy appear to be lagging behind others in the U.S., stagnated or even digressing for some reason, and hence displaying indications, consensus, and rankings more near middle of the pack? with an overall ranking of 25th or below on average in comparison to the other states. Very long research question, but I was trying to focus in as much as possible, which was difficult to do, but that's what we came up with. Looking at the identifying the actual problem then, and then hence the problem statement. Two things were going on there as far as trying to assess all the information through basically the research, all the research done, but at the same time also the literature review. And what we were coming up with was that process of assessment to then formulate that problem statement, which are next. No easy task there. When we looked at, or when I was looking at the process assessment, I was trying to basically have a goal of meta-analysis. What does that mean? Meaning that I really wanted to have the goal of looking at scholarly research within the field that was current, that was relevant, and that was based on other scholarly work, empirical evidence. That's what it meant. A lot of stuff that we were able to get was based on statistical data, yes, and relevant and up to date and things of that nature. And some of the stuff was built on, or was based on scholarly work and studies, absolutely. But the goal was to have all of it be a type of meta-analysis on every regard. That was the goal. From there, we built the problem statement, or I built the problem statement. No easy task. Again, trying to stay within the premise of the research question. This is what was come up with. And this was the end result, too, on top of the fact. What was considered a problem, subjective or not, this was considered a problem, an issue. Michigan's economy did not appear to be growing economically viable, nor reflected any conspicuous signs of change or adaptation for the demands of a 21st century market economy of the future. Upon more careful review of the state records, statistics, and longitudinal studies, it appeared clear that Michigan had developed some type of industry-driven dependency upon manufacturing to the state's own detriment, since that same reliance was found to be contrary to Michigan's own business model, preparatory services, and future progression. In other words, education and industry did not appear correlated, working together for the better good of Michigan, which was alarming since education flourished and grew, but the state's economy did not. Had to come up with a plan then. And the reality was this started to form the plan proposal, and this was something simple put to start really making a dent into what was considered an issue and or a problem for Michigan for the future. It wasn't going to be able to conceivably solve the problem. It might not even made an initial dent, but it was a start. Even if it was to start further research and study about the problems going on in Michigan. What was being recommended was recommending an addition of a newfound Masters of Arts in Leadership for the future. A newfound Master of Arts in Leadership for the future at a local Michigan university to first gather here concept approval for the proposal as the first phase, along with needed idea, suggestions, and additional input. The plan approval would be an institutional cooperative 2-year testing phase type between a pre-identified already existing MAL provider like University of Jamestown to have their program hosted online as a satellite campus offering to next consider. In other words, next phase. Looking at the actual project summary, we were getting into reporting. In other words, the report meaning the paper that was written. when we look at reporting and we look at what this is based upon, which is the state of Michigan, not everybody may be familiar with my state, which is the state of Michigan. This is a northern state that is considered Midwest, but it is north, right next to Canada. And you'll see over to the far right that it, what do you want to call this? It borders right next to Windsor, Ontario, Canada. And you see that at the bottom right, you see Detroit. To the far right and bottom, and you'll see Windsor, that is Canada. So you'll see center state where the green is, Lansing. This is very interesting to see because it is a very centralized type of industry where you see a lot of the state of Michigan offices are all centralized right there, center state, in the capital, in Lansing, which made it easy for a lot of different statistics to be pulled and different industry data because a lot of the industries were centralized out of Lansing. Although back in the day, a lot were centralized between there and Flint, which is over to the right, and then Detroit, where a lot more were at also. And you'll see that again over by Windsor. So down at the bottom, you'll see this is the kind of state that is not only a Midwest state, considered conservative, but according to the U.S. Census Bureau statistics, as of late, it's at just under 10 million, or 9.99 million. Looking at reporting again for the paper that was done up as part of the capstone for this project, or the piece of the reporting, we're looking at the project composition and the study content. So we have that paper that was done up, and that is available. That will be available as of August 3rd for anyone interested. Hope you are. We had this presentation that was done up and turned into also video form, but it is PowerPoint form also available. Upon request. And we had some supplemental information that you'll see even at the end of this, that if you're not seeing from before when we started, that is equally available. That supplements the proposal, this presentation, and or the paper, believe it or not, as appendices that will be seen between an actual voluntary evaluation, what is called an interest evaluation for a Masters of Masters of Art and Leadership program. At the same time, a fact sheet on the program itself, the paper that we mentioned a couple different times, and even a dossier of all the slides that we went through for today. That will all be available within by August 3rd. So what were the specific findings, right? The literature review, a lot of yielded a lot. Look at those key critical areas within, again, that literature review. We looked at three main things. We looked at the lead industry. We looked then at that point into workforce development. And finally, we looked at one more thing, the higher education for the state of Michigan. Starting off then first with lead industry, we looked at manufacturing, or what some people would consider factory work in the state of Michigan. And what we found out, or what we learned about Michigan, was that it was famous for automotive making, and it was that industry was still the lead industry, the largest employer being General Motors. And we had quite a few academic values that we wanted to look at as far as their status to know a lot more about Michigan's lead industry, which was next. Economic values and status. So here's what we came up with under that lead industry that were considered really key to the status of Michigan as related to lead industry, and what we considered then those economic values. Total economic output was considered a U.S. ranking of 12th overall. The per capita income was at $27,405, which had fell or dropped 16% from 1995 to 2015. Unemployment was at 4.8%, which was close to the national average, but still below. So the U.S. rank came in at 42nd. 42nd, that's out of, again, 50 states for the United States. Looking at workforce development next, totally different, but still within industry. We had what was reported as a state majority of unskilled workers. In other words, the majority were working within that same lead industry of manufacturing, but were considered unskilled. I'll give you one of the examples is the labor supply is one of the things that were looked at, kind of another economic value, was ranked 47th out of 50 states by Forbes. Job loss was one of the other key issues that I considered to include here. From 1995 to 2005, for example, 3 million manufacturing jobs were lost out of that workforce. Higher education was last, as we looked at post-secondary education and academic performance. We looked at U.S. rankings, which had Michigan ranked as 32nd overall for the last year taken, which 2014 to 2015. Looked at the enrollment total, which was for the state, was at 244,751 for the most recent undergraduate degree seeking in state. And out of that status, from 2005 to 2015, it had gone up for full-time students by 14%. Degrees conferred had gone up 32% for bachelor's degrees. Most popular degree, though, being business administration. Males and females, of all that were earned, it was 22.3%, all for that same type of degree. Issue identification. Wanted to basically look at the hypothesis and not just the research question and not just the problem statement itself, but look at cause and effect relationships for what was going on conceptually and try to make sure that as we looked at the problem statement, now we were looking at it and saying, this is kind of our end feeling about it. So here's the validity and the final determination. The problem statement was found to be valid. State records and reports corroborated as indications all point towards the fact that the state of Michigan had developed some type of economic dependency of sorts upon unskilled manufacturing work in state to their own potential detriment over time. And importantly, manufacturing was shown to be the state's lead industry, including the state's largest employer, General Motors, who had been able to capture the largest majority of Michigan's workforce also to know. Yet, these same economic areas showed still no real signs of economic stability, growth, or success, in contrast to that of higher education, and let's get into a final review. So what did we go over today? We obviously started off and went over an exploration into a research question, a problem statement, and a potential phenomenon about the state of Michigan's economic status and or what was being cited as a potential dependency on one industry, and trying to decipher if it was felt within that same research question and problem statement formed, if it was felt that Michigan was considered successful or not at this point, and it was not. So that was the presentation summary, what I just mentioned, what information we reviewed. What do we think we learned? I learned everything about Michigan, to be honest with you, everything about demographical data, industry data, workforce data, learning along the way about how to form my research question at the start, but at the same time then identify an hypothesis to form a problem statement that could tie in everything that was going on with Michigan and a potential phenomenon that dealt with a dependency. And that's what was read. So revelations were about all those things, and that it could be going on in my own state. Limitations were time, resources, and what I wanted to accomplish qualitatively, believe it or not, for testing and really study the phenomena a lot more, and hoping that others would do the same in the future. This came to mind more than anything else at the beginning and at the tail end, and this was from the movie. You see it kind of cited below. It's Marlon Brando's character as Dr. Moreau in the 1996 movie of Island of Dr. Moreau, and it says, "Please forgive me. I have a hard time summarizing over 20 years of work into one conversation," which is how I felt even trying to present today or in my capstone paper. It just was difficult. We do have a voluntary survey that is available that can be returned by either hard copy, mailed. All the information will be available here at the end, plus on the survey itself. It can be returned also by email or fax or anything someone is able to do or willing to do, and I would just so appreciate your further input and feedback if you'd like to look at that and or make it out, and if not, what it is it's for basically undergraduates. But if you wanted to act like an undergraduate and fill that out, that would be fine. Just want to thank everybody for listening and being here today. My name is Shane Tisdale. I was your proposer for Transforming the Business Leader on today, July 25th, as part of my requirements, to fulfill my requirements for the Master's of Arts in Leadership. Master's Arts in Leadership, and I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you have a lot of questions, because as this finishes or you're pushing pause, I'm available again by phone and on Skype to answer any and all. This is all my contact information you can go back to, though, at any point. And again, continue to push pause on to get to me at any time, and or anyone else that has questions about it. And with that, you can push pause, and or hopefully I can field any and all questions from the audience about any of the things we went over today. And I just want to thank you again. And this was Transforming the Business Leader.